T.I.'s son, King. King Harris has been arrested.
Sir, there's one in the head.
Does your buddy have one as well?
It's guns in here.
Breaking news tonight, and the weight of it feels unbearable. The story unfolding inside the walls of a private Atlanta hospital has left the world in shock. The hallways, usually buzzing with the quiet hum of medical routines, have fallen into an unsettling silence. Doctors and nurses move like shadows, their whispers carrying rumors too heavy for the air. Something catastrophic has happened, and the name at the center of this storm is King Harris. According to leaked reports, the latest test results have painted a picture darker than anyone imagined. Insiders describe them as beyond repair. One doctor was even overheard saying that if King ever regains consciousness, his life will never return to what it was. Music, performance, the very voice that carried his dreams, gone. Fans, who once saw him as a rising star, are now staring at headlines that feel more like obituaries. Inside the hospital, grief has erupted like wildfire. King's family received the news in a private consultation room, but their reaction shook the entire floor. His mother collapsed instantly, falling to the cold linoleum, screaming her son's name as nurses rushed to help her breathe. His siblings clung to each other in disbelief, tears pouring uncontrollably. And his father, T.I., the man fans saw as unshakable, stood frozen at first, then slammed his fists against the wall until his knuckles bled. Witnesses said the sound echoed down the corridor like thunder. The Harris family's nightmare had just begun. The aftermath of that devastating announcement unfolded like a scene torn from tragedy itself. Tiny, the woman known to millions as both a mother and a performer, could not withstand the weight of the doctor's words. She fainted before she could even finish crying, her body crumpling to the floor. Nurses rushed to her side, fanning her, checking her pulse, begging her to hold on. Witnesses said her sobs between gasps of air echoed with a mother's primal terror, the fear of losing her child forever. Meanwhile, T.I.'s reaction was raw and violent. At first, he stood in stunned silence, his eyes locked on the floor, as though refusing to believe. Then, without warning, he turned and punched the nearest wall with such force that blood streamed from his knuckles. Staff pleaded with him to stop, but he continued shouting, "Not my son! You will not take my son!" until security intervened. Even hardened hospital workers admitted they had never seen such grief. The siblings were no stronger. King's eye. Brothers and sisters crowded the corridor, collapsing into each other's arms. Some screamed his name, others sobbed until they could no longer stand. Nurses tried to console them, but their words offered no comfort. Witnesses later described the entire hallway as a battlefield of emotions: despair, rage, disbelief. Onlookers, from staff to visiting families, said they felt their own hearts break as they watched hip-hop's royal family unravel before their eyes. It wasn't just sorrow. It was devastation that tore through walls and left everyone shaken. Just when it seemed the Harris family's nightmare could not deepen, whispers began spreading through the hospital corridors. Anonymous staff members hinted that the medical documents shown to the family were not the originals. According to these insiders, the results had been deliberately altered, rewritten to present the worst possible outcome. One nurse, trembling with fear, confided to a colleague, "What they're telling the family isn't the truth. Someone higher up gave orders to change the reports." The rumors exploded when a grainy, late-night video surfaced online. In the clip, two men wearing medical coats appeared to be speaking in hushed tones near a dimly lit office. The audio, though muffled, captured one of them saying, "We've been told to declare hope is gone." The other voice responded nervously, "But his brain activity isn't that low." Before the clip ended, the first man whispered again, "Orders came from above. Do as you're told." The video went viral within hours, flooding every platform. Fans who had been mourning instantly turned to outrage. The hashtags, "Justice for King," and "fake reports" shot to the top of global trends. Twitter threads dissected every frame of the footage. TikTok creators slowed down the audio, enhancing whispers, analyzing hand gestures, searching for hidden truths. Bloggers claimed the situation reeked of sabotage. YouTubers streamed live discussions with thousands watching in real time, each one demanding answers. Could the son of hip-hop royalty be a victim not of tragedy, but of a calculated deception? The story was no longer confined to hospital walls. It had become a worldwide scandal, one that painted a chilling picture. King Harris wasn't just fighting for survival. He was possibly fighting against a conspiracy determined to bury his future before it even began. As the rumors raged online, the Harris family braced for yet another crushing blow. In a private consultation, senior doctors delivered what they called the final truth. The scans, they claimed, revealed irreversible brain damage. The words cut like blades. They explained that even if King were to wake, his motor skills would never fully recover. His rhythm, memory, and speech could all be permanently impaired. And the harshest line of all, King Harris would never rap, never sing, never perform again. For a boy who had built his entire identity around music, it was more than a medical verdict. It was the death of a dream. Witnesses said the family sat in stunned silence before the wave of grief crashed again. Tiny fell to her knees, clutching the doctor's hands, begging through tears, "Please don't say his future is over. Please tell me there's hope." Her voice cracked as she repeated, "Not my baby, not my king." T.I., however, reacted with rage. He refused to accept the explanation, demanding second opinions, third opinions, any shred of evidence that could contradict what he had just heard. His anger spilled into the corridors, echoing through the ICU. "Show me the real results," he shouted. "Stop lying to us." Staff tried to calm him, but nothing could soothe a father convinced his son was being written off. That day, the hospital became more than a place of healing. It became a stage for despair and confrontation. And while the Harris family's faith cracked under the weight of medical certainty, the world outside was already doubting whether the truth was the truth at all. The storm intensified when a chilling audio note surfaced online, allegedly recorded by a nurse inside the hospital. In the shaky voice message, the woman claimed that critical details about King Harris's condition were being hidden from the family and the public. "They're not telling the truth," she whispered. "The reports you've seen are altered. King's scans show more activity than they're admitting. Someone doesn't want this to get out." Within minutes, the clip spread across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram like wildfire. Social media erupted in a frenzy. Supporters flooded platforms with rage and heartbreak, fueling conspiracy theories and demanding transparency. New hashtags surged to the top of global trends: "Your Save King" and "Dark Stop," the cover-up. Fan accounts plastered his face across timelines, demanding answers from the hospital, tagging politicians, celebrities, and even the president. TikTokers remixed the voice note with dramatic edits, spreading the message further to millions. The impact stretched far beyond screens. In Atlanta, the first wave of protesters gathered outside the hospital's gates, holding handmade signs reading, "Justice for King" and "Tell the Truth." Some carried loudspeakers, chanting into the night, while others live-streamed the scene to thousands of viewers. Cars honked in solidarity as they drove by, the noise growing louder with every passing hour. By midnight, the hospital, once cloaked in quiet whispers, was surrounded by a wall of public outrage. What began as grief had transformed into a movement. King Harris was no longer just a patient fighting for his future. He had become the symbol of a battle between truth and deception. As the protests swelled outside, another bombshell dropped. A blurry late-night video filmed secretly inside the hospital. The shaky footage, clearly captured on a hidden phone, showed two doctors standing near King Harris's room. Though the grain was heavy, their anxious body language was undeniable. With the volume raised, the faint whispers became chilling. One voice could be heard saying, "The order is final. We must declare his career gone." The other replied nervously, "But what if he recovers more than they expect?" The first man snapped back, "That's not our decision. Just make the statement." The clip ended abruptly, but it was enough to send the internet into absolute chaos. Fans flooded comment sections, demanding names and accountability. Twitter exploded with threads dissecting every blurred frame, while YouTubers paused and slowed the video to expose supposed hidden edits. The phrase "career gone" became the most quoted line of the day, sparking fury across the globe. Outside the hospital, the crowd doubled overnight. Protesters held up phones playing the leaked video on repeat, amplifying the anger. Chants of "Stop the lies" and "King deserves truth" shook the neighborhood. Police were eventually called to control the swelling demonstration, but even flashing lights couldn't drown the voices of hundreds determined to expose what they believed was a cover-up. The blurry footage may have lacked clarity, but its impact was sharp and immediate. The Harris family's private nightmare had become a public war cry, and the pressure on the hospital reached a boiling point that no statement could silence. The tension between the Harris family and hospital staff finally erupted into a public confrontation. Witnesses described chaos in the corridors when Zanique, King's sister, lost control and began screaming at the top of her lungs. Her voice carried through the sterile halls as she shouted, "You're lying to us! Stop hiding the truth about my brother!" Nurses rushed to calm her, but she pushed past them, demanding answers directly from the doctors. The eruption didn't end there. T.I. arrived moments later, his presence electric with fury. Pointing at the medical staff, he threatened lawsuits that could bring the whole institution down. He shouted that the family would expose anyone responsible for misleading them and promised to drag the truth into the public eye. His rage was so intense that security had no choice but to step in, forming a visible line between the family and the doctors. The hospital, once overwhelmed by whispers and leaks, now braced for an outright war. Administrators ordered tighter security protocols, restricting who could access the ICU wing where King lay. Guards stood stationed at the entrances, while staff whispered about how they had never seen such hostility between a celebrity family and a medical team. For the Harris family, this was no longer a tragedy contained within hospital walls. It was a battle for survival, justice, and truth, and the world was watching. While the Harris family clung desperately to hope, the internet turned cruel. Gossip blogs and entertainment sites plastered sensational headlines across their front pages. "King Harris's career is over," and "Harris family in denial." These stories spread faster than fact, feeding a narrative that the young rapper's future was permanently destroyed. But the poison didn't stop there. Late one night, a so-called leaked medical report began circulating online. The document claimed traces of illicit substances were found in King's blood work, painting the picture of a reckless artist whose downfall was self-inflicted. The timing was suspicious. Just as the family had begun to push back against the hospital's version of events, the Harris family immediately denied the allegations, releasing statements through close friends and publicists. They described the report as a malicious fabrication designed to smear King's name while he lay helpless in a hospital bed. Fans rallied in defense, pointing out inconsistencies in the document's formatting and questioning the motives behind its release. Still, the damage was done. Headlines screamed scandal, and the narrative of troubled star began to overshadow the truth. For Tiny, the rumors were another knife to the heart. Witnesses said she sobbed openly, crying that her son's character was being assassinated while he couldn't defend himself. T.I., meanwhile, raged online, firing off furious posts demanding that the so-called report be retracted. What had begun as a medical crisis had now morphed into a smear campaign, and while King fought for his life inside the hospital, his reputation was being torn apart outside of it. As the chaos spread from hospital walls to the outside world, Darker whispers began circling through the music industry itself. Fans and insiders alike started to wonder if King Harris's tragedy wasn't simply medical misfortune, but a calculated effort by powerful executives determined to silence him. The theory went like this. King's rapid rise had rattled industry veterans. At just his age, he was already being compared to icons and building a following that many feared could shift power balances in hip-hop. His independent spirit and refusal to play the label game had made him a threat to corporate profits. Suddenly, with his career teetering on the edge of destruction, people began asking, who stood to gain the most from his silence? An anonymous producer fueled the fire when he allegedly contacted a blog under the condition his name be withheld. In his words, "There are execs who never wanted King to make it this far. He was too raw, too uncontrollable, and he couldn't be bought. Don't think for a second they wouldn't pull strings to shut him down." The quote spread across hip-hop forums like wildfire, cited as proof that King wasn't just a victim of circumstance, but of systemic sabotage. Debates raged online. Some argued the conspiracy talk was baseless, born out of grief and paranoia. Others insisted the pattern was too familiar. Young artists on the brink of superstardom suddenly derailed by scandal, tragedy, or unexplained setbacks. Twitter spaces and clubhouse rooms ran late into the night, with thousands dissecting every angle, every coincidence. What had started as a medical story had now become a conversation about corruption at the heart of the music industry. And for many, King Harris had become a symbol of what happens when a rising star dares to shine too bright. Inside the hospital, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to unbearable. Security teams flooded the halls, stationed at every entrance and outside the ICU. Their presence wasn't just precautionary. It was a shield against the growing chaos. Protesters outside grew louder, reporters tried sneaking in, and fans camped nearby, desperate for updates. What once felt like a place of healing now resembled a fortress under siege. Reporters, refusing to be kept at bay, swarmed the hospital perimeter, thrusting cameras and microphones at anyone exiting the building. Some even disguised themselves as visitors, slipping past the first security checks before being dragged out by guards. The frenzy was relentless, with headlines being written in real time from scraps of overheard conversations. The strain broke through to the staff. Nurses, already overwhelmed by patient care, crumbled under the added weight of scrutiny. Several were seen crying in the corridors, whispering that they hadn't signed up for this level of pressure. One nurse reportedly resigned on the spot, muttering that she feared for her safety. And through it all, at the center of the storm, lay King Harris, silent, unmoving, connected to a maze of tubes and monitors. His frail figure became the backdrop for a spectacle of chaos, grief, and conspiracy. Each beep of the machines reminded everyone that while the world outside argued, speculated, and screamed, the young rapper was still fighting the most important battle of all, the one for his life. Amidst the chaos, T.I. found quiet moments at his son's bedside, moments where the world's noise seemed to fall away. Leaning close to King, his voice softened to a whisper. "You're stronger than this, son. You hear me? You're a Harris. You fight. Don't let them write your story before you finish it." Witnesses described the hardened rapper's eyes glistening with tears, a sight of him rarely seen in public. The family created a rotation of bedside vigils, making sure King was never left alone. Tiny would hold his hand, humming soft lullabies she once sang when he was a child. His siblings read messages from fans aloud, hoping their words of love would reach him through the haze. Every hour, another relative stepped in, bringing warmth to a room otherwise filled with machines and sterility. The intimacy of these moments contrasted sharply with the storm outside. For the Harris family, time stood still at King's bedside. Every whisper, every touch, was both a plea and a prayer, a desperate attempt to call him back from the edge. Just as fans rallied behind King, the darker side of the rap world made its presence known. Several rival rappers began posting cryptic tweets, thinly veiled jabs at King's situation. One line read, "Funny how some careers end before they even start." Another quipped, Not everyone built for this life. Screenshots spread like wildfire, with fans immediately identifying the culprits. The reaction was explosive. Supporters flooded the replies, calling the posts disgusting and heartless. How can you mock a man fighting for his life? One fan tweeted, a sentiment echoed thousands of times. The backlash forced some rappers to delete their tweets, but by then, the damage had been done. Screenshots had already gone viral, immortalizing their cruelty. Then came the supposed leaked private chats. Messages circulated claiming that certain artists were joking about King's condition in group threads, even sharing memes. While the authenticity of these chats couldn't be confirmed, they added more fuel to the raging fire. Instead of unity, the hip-hop community found itself divided, half demanding respect for King's struggle, the other half using his tragedy as ammunition in old rivalries. The spectacle only deepened the Harris family's pain. The world held its breath when the hospital finally announced an official press conference. Cameras from every major network lined the packed hall, flashes bouncing off the walls as reporters whispered nervously. At the podium stood the lead doctor, his expression grave, his voice measured. With a deep sigh, he delivered the words that shattered millions of hearts. Despite our best efforts, the tests confirm permanent brain damage. While King Harris remains alive, his cognitive and motor functions are unlikely to return to pre-incident levels. His music career, tragically, is over. The statement dropped like a grenade. Gasps rippled through the press hall, followed by audible sobs. Some journalists struggled to maintain composure as they relayed the breaking news live. On social media, disbelief exploded within seconds. Fans refused to accept what they were hearing. Comments poured in. They're lying to us. This doesn't make sense. King is a fighter. Don't bury him yet. The press hall itself descended into chaos. Reporters shouted questions at once. Why are there inconsistencies in the scans? How do you explain the leaks? Are you hiding the truth? The doctor dodged specifics, insisting they had shared all that could be shared. Security eventually had to usher the panel out as shouting overwhelmed the room. That night, headlines worldwide carried the bombshell. But instead of clarity, the announcement only ignited more suspicion. For many, the press conference wasn't closure. It was confirmation that something was being hidden. Barely a day after the press conference, another leak surfaced, shaking the narrative to its core. An anonymous staff member released internal data showing strong, consistent brain activity in King Harris, far higher than what had been presented publicly. Screenshots of the scan spread instantly, sparking outrage. The so-called permanent damage diagnosis suddenly looked less like medical fact and more like deliberate deception. Fans immediately began connecting the dots. They pointed to rumors of unreleased tracks King had recorded in recent months, songs said to be his best work yet, music that could disrupt the balance of power in hip-hop. TikTok exploded with videos piecing the theories together. Clips of the leaked scans overlapped with snippets of King's past performances. Captions reading, "They fear his rise." The hashtag #TruckSabotageKing began trending alongside #TruckJustSaveKing, uniting fans across continents. Creators made viral edits, syncing his unreleased lyrics from old studio leaks with footage of the protests outside the hospital. Each post was a rallying cry, framing King not as a fallen star, but as an artist silenced before his time. The backlash was immediate and global. Celebrities reposted the leak, demanding transparency. Politicians called for investigations. Outside the hospital, protesters doubled in size, chanting louder than ever. What was once framed as a tragic medical reality had now mutated into a worldwide scandal. The second leak didn't just question the doctor's honesty. It shattered trust entirely, painting the picture of a conspiracy so vast that millions were unwilling to let the story end there. The breaking point for the Harris family came in front of the very cameras they had tried to avoid. During a tense media gathering outside the hospital, Tiny collapsed once again, fainting in the middle of the crowd. Reporters captured the heartbreaking scene as family members rushed to fan her and revive her, her sobs echoing through the microphones. "I can't lose him," she cried when she finally came to, her face streaked with tears. Ty's rage exploded moments later. In full view of flashing cameras, he grabbed a chair and smashed it against a barricade, shouting curses at hospital administrators and anyone he believed was complicit in the cover-up. "You will not kill my son's future!" he roared, his voice trembling with fury. Security scrambled to contain the chaos, but the damage had already been done. The family's anguish was now public record. Then Zanique, raw with emotion, pulled out her phone and went live on Instagram. Millions tuned in within minutes as she screamed into the camera, "They're lying to you! My brother is not gone, they're hiding him from us. Don't believe their reports!" Her stream lit social media on fire, solidifying the Harris family's meltdown as both a cry for help and an act of defiance. Just when it seemed the story couldn't escalate further, a shocking video appeared online late at night. The grainy clip, filmed secretly inside King Harris's hospital room, showed his frail body lying motionless under tubes and wires. But in a haunting moment, his fingers twitched, followed by what appeared to be a faint attempt at moving his lips. The video's caption was simple yet explosive. "He's alive." "They're hiding him." Within minutes, the internet went nuclear. Fans flooded timelines with disbelief and fury. Was King more responsive than doctors admitted? Was the hospital intentionally keeping him hidden from his own family? The clip racked up millions of views in hours, dissected frame by TikTokers and YouTubers determined to prove he was conscious. Some argued the movements were involuntary, just reflexes. Others swore it was proof King was fighting his way back, evidence that the permanent damage narrative was nothing but lies. Protesters outside the hospital replayed the footage on giant screens, chanting louder than ever. With the disturbing leak now viral, the pressure on the hospital, and the industry figures accused of silencing King, reached a fever pitch. As if the story wasn't already steeped in suspicion, another bombshell dropped when security footage leaked to the press. The video, time-stamped just after midnight, showed two men in dark suits quietly slipping into King Harris's hospital room. They weren't doctors, and they weren't family. Their polished shoes and stiff demeanor screamed authority, but their presence raised more questions than answers. The grainy audio from the recording caught one of them speaking in a low, deliberate voice, "Make sure nothing leaves this room. His career is over tonight." The second man nodded, phone in hand, seemingly documenting King's condition. No vitals were checked, no equipment was adjusted. Their purpose had nothing to do with care. When the footage hit social media, outrage erupted worldwide. Who were these men? Industry executives? Government officials? Or shadowy figures tied to the business of silencing artists? The silence from the hospital made it worse. No explanation, no statement, not even a denial. Fans demanded identities, calling it proof that forces beyond medicine were controlling King's fate. "This isn't healthcare," one viral tweet read. "This is a hit job in plain sight." The suits became a symbol of the conspiracy, faceless power figures pulling strings in the shadows, while King lay helpless. Inside the hospital, fear was tightening its grip. Nurses who had whispered too much began vanishing from their shifts, quietly reassigned or mysteriously absent. Those who remained walked with their heads down, avoiding eye contact, terrified of speaking a single word that might expose the truth. Even more chilling, family members began noticing files missing from the charts. Documents they had glimpsed just hours earlier were suddenly gone, erased as if they never existed. When T.I. demanded answers, he was told the paperwork was being reviewed, but no one ever returned it. The hallways themselves had become a maze of intimidation. Security guards stood like sentinels at every corner, their presence less about protection and more about silencing. Doctors avoided the family, slipping into rooms with clipboards and leaving without explanation. One insider described the atmosphere as suffocating. "It feels like we're being watched every second," they said. Everyone is scared. Not of medicine, but of the people behind it. The hospital no longer felt like a place of healing. It felt like a prison, where fear ruled, and the truth was being buried deeper with every passing hour. As King Harris's condition grew more mysterious, whispers in the industry painted a darker picture. Executives who once courted him were now quietly distancing themselves, protecting billion-dollar investments that might crumble if his career soared unchecked. A rising star like King didn't just threaten fellow rappers. He threatened balance sheets, contracts, and the entire hierarchy of power in hip-hop. Rivals who had once sparred with King on social media now gloated publicly, hinting that his downfall cleared the path for their own dominance. Cryptic posts, thinly veiled jabs, and celebratory emojis filled timelines, fueling suspicions that some rappers were relieved, if not complicit. Theories swirled that the accident wasn't an accident at all. Fans speculated about industry sabotage, alleging that powerful figures orchestrated events to silence King before he could disrupt the old guard. Too much talent, too much influence. They couldn't let him win, one viral comment read, echoing the sentiment of millions. Whether rooted in fact or paranoia, these narratives fed a growing belief. King's suffering was not just personal tragedy, but a chess move in a ruthless game where careers are crushed to protect empires. What began as whispers online turned into boots on the ground. Crowds gathered outside the hospital, their chants shaking the glass windows. "Justice for King!" echoed down the streets, growing louder by the hour. Fans held posters with his face, demanding transparency, demanding truth. By nightfall, the demonstrations had spread far beyond Atlanta. From New York to Los Angeles, London to Lagos, people filled city squares, waving signs and blasting King's music from speakers. The movement had become global, but peaceful chants quickly escalated into chaos. Police in riot gear formed barricades, clashing with angry fans who refused to disperse. Tear gas clouded the air while batons cracked against shields. Live streams of the confrontations drew millions of views, turning the protests into a rolling, unfiltered news event. Mainstream media scrambled to cover the firestorm. Anchors shouted over breaking footage, their voices tinged with disbelief. Some networks leaned into conspiracy narratives, while others condemned the unrest as dangerous mob behavior. The frenzy only deepened divisions. Inside the chaos, one truth rang clear. King Harris's plight had transcended music. He was now a symbol of industry corruption, of silenced voices, of youth demanding change. The world was no longer watching quietly. It was roaring for answers. The ICU had become a chamber of unbearable silence, broken only by the mechanical beeping of machines keeping King Harris tethered to life. His once vibrant frame now looked frighteningly frail. His lips cracked from dehydration, his eyes sealed shut as though locked in a battle no one else could see. The fluorescent hospital light painted him pale, each flicker casting long shadows across the sterile room. Around his bed, the Harris family clung to hope like a lifeline. Tiny whispered prayers, her trembling fingers brushing against King's cold hand. T.I. stood stone-faced, but his jaw tightened each time the monitor's rhythm faltered. Zanique sat quietly in the corner, tears streaking her cheeks as she scrolled through endless messages of love pouring in from fans. Despite the grief hanging in the air, the family refused to let despair claim the moment. They rotated bedside vigils, determined never to leave King alone, as though their presence might guide him back. To them, every rise and fall of his chest was a silent promise that he was still fighting. But behind the closed doors of the ICU, the heartbreaking reality weighed heavy. The boy who had once lit up stages now lay still, and no one could say for certain if he would ever return. As the world watched this tragedy unfold, one question hung in the air, louder than the hospital machines, louder than the chants outside. Was this fate or sabotage? The conflicting reports, the hidden files, the mysterious men in suits, it all hinted at something darker lurking beneath the surface. This was no longer just about one young artist's future. It was about the machinery of an industry that thrived on control, secrecy, and profit. If King Harris could be silenced at the height of his promise, what did that mean for every other rising artist? How many dreams had been crushed in the shadows, away from cameras and hashtags? The story had grown bigger than music. It was about corruption, power, and the cost of daring to disrupt a system built to protect the few. Fans weren't simply mourning King's silence. They were demanding to know why his voice had been stifled, and by whom. The narrator's words echoed through headlines, TikToks, and live streams. What are they hiding? Why is truth so dangerous? These haunting questions became a rallying cry. For every young artist watching, it was a warning. Talent alone could not shield you from the forces waiting to pull the strings. In the end, the call was clear. Justice for King Harris was justice for all. Until answers came, the world would not rest. The fight had only begun.